The village square buzzed with energy as the annual festival reached its peak. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of freshly baked pies and roasted meats, mingling with the earthy scent of hay bales stacked for seating. Vendors called out to passers-by, enticing them with shiny trinkets, handmade scarves, and jars of honey that caught the sunlight like gold. Children darted between stalls, their laughter ringing out like music, while adults exchanged warm greetings and shared stories about festivals past. At the heart of it all stood the fountain, a stone structure adorned with carvings of vines and flowers. Water cascaded gently into the basin below, creating a soothing backdrop to the lively chaos around it. It was here that Captain Alden had stationed himself, his presence commanding yet aloof. He stood tall, his polished boots reflecting the sunlight, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the crowd. His cap, perched neatly atop his head, seemed almost too perfect, a symbol of authority that no one dared question. Clara watched him from a distance, her arms crossed and her foot tapping impatiently. She hated how everyone tiptoed around him, as if he were some untouchable figure. To her, he wasn't a protector. He was a barrier, someone who sucked the joy out of every moment with his stern glares and rigid rules. Her friends noticed her staring and quickly pulled her aside. "Clara, stop looking at him like that," whispered Leela, her best friend. "You're going to get yourself in trouble." "I'm not doing anything wrong," Clara shot back, though her tone betrayed her frustration. "He's just standing there, acting like he owns the place. Why does everyone let him?" "It's his job," Layla replied softly, glancing nervously toward the captain. "And you know what happens when people cross him. Remember old Mr. Hargrove? He only said one little thing last month, and now he can't even go near the market without being washed." Clara rolled her eyes but didn't argue further. Instead, she turned her attention back to the festivities, trying, and failing, to push thoughts of Captain Alden out of her mind. Everywhere she looked, people. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the narrow window of her cell, Clara heard the sound of footsteps approaching. At first, she thought it might be another guard coming to check on her or perhaps bring some stale bread and water. But when the door creaked open, she was surprised to see Lieutenant Elias standing there. Unlike Captain Alden, Elias had always been quieter, more reserved. He wasn't as intimidating as the other guards, and Clara remembered seeing him occasionally smile at villagers during patrols. His presence now felt oddly comforting. "Clara," he said softly, his tone far gentler than she expected. "Can we talk?" She nodded hesitantly, rising from the cold floor where she'd spent most of the night. Her legs were stiff, and her body ached, but she pushed the discomfort aside. Elias stepped into the cell, closing the door behind him but leaving it unlocked, a small gesture that didn't go unnoticed. He pulled up a wooden stool and sat down, his posture relaxed, but his expression serious. "I know what you did was wrong," he began, meeting her gaze directly. "But I also know you didn't mean for things to escalate like this. Am I right?" Clara swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She hadn't expected anyone, especially one of the guards, to show her any kindness after what had happened. I don't know," she admitted finally. "I just wanted to prove a point. I didn't think it would turn into all this." Elias nodded slowly, as if he'd already anticipated her answer. "You have fire in you, Clara. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Passionate people can change the world if they channel their energy the right way. But defiance without purpose, that's dangerous." His words struck a chord deep within her. For days, she'd been replaying her actions in her mind, trying to make sense of why she'd done what she did. Hearing Elias put it so plainly made her realize just how reckless she'd been. She lowered her head, ashamed but also curious about where this conversation was headed. "I've spoken to Captain Alden," Elias continued after a pause. "He's furious, of course, but he's also willing to listen, if you're willing to take responsibility for your actions." Clara's heart skipped a beat. Responsibility. She knew she couldn't undo what had happened, But maybe there was still a chance to fix things, or at least begin to. "What does that mean?" she asked cautiously. "It means apologizing, not just to the captain, but to the village. Publicly," Elias explained. "And it means working alongside us, under supervision, to rebuild trust. It won't be easy. People are angry, and they'll expect you to earn back their respect. But if you're sincere, I believe they'll give you a chance." Clara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her chest. This was more than she deserved, yet here was Elias, offering her a lifeline. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias smiled faintly. "Because I see potential in you, Clara. You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who also struggled with authority, but eventually learned how to use their passion for good. I think you can do the same." For the first time since her arrest, Clara felt something besides fear and regret. Gratitude. She nodded firmly, determination replacing the uncertainty in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "I want to make things right." Elias stood, extending a hand to help her up. "Then let's get started. First, you'll need to write an apology, a real one, and prepare to face the consequences. After that, we'll figure out the rest." As they left the cell together, Clara couldn't help but glance back at the cold, empty space she'd occupied for so long. It symbolized her lowest moment, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter. With Elias by her side, guiding her toward redemption, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could turn this disaster into something meaningful. In a small, quiet village surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, life was simple and predictable. The villagers woke up with the sun, worked hard during the day, and gathered around cozy fires at night to share stories. Everyone knew each other, and while there were occasional disagreements, peace usually reigned. But one thing kept the villagers cautious: the guardsmen. These men patrolled the streets, ensuring that no one broke the rules set by the town's leaders. Among the villagers lived Clara, a young woman unlike most others in the village. She had bright eyes that sparkled with curiosity and a boldness that sometimes got her into trouble. Clara loved asking questions, especially about things she didn't understand. "Why do we have so many rules?" she would ask her parents or friends, who decided they were necessary. Most people shrugged off her questions, telling her not to worry too much. After all, the guardsmen were there for protection, right? But Clara wasn't convinced. To her, the guards seemed more like enforcers of fear than protectors of safety. The leader of the guardsmen was Captain Alden, a tall man with sharp features and an even sharper temper. His uniform was always spotless, his boots polished to a mirror shine, and his cap, a symbol of his authority, sat perfectly on his head. He walked through the village with long strides, his piercing gaze scanning every corner. Villagers lowered their voices when he passed, afraid of drawing his attention. Children were warned to stay out of his way, and adults avoided eye contact altogether. Everyone respected, or feared, him deeply. Clara, however, couldn't help but feel frustrated whenever she saw him. Why did he act as if he owned the village? Wasn't it their home too? Her friends often teased her about her dislike for the captain, reminding her how dangerous it could be to cross him. "You'll get yourself in trouble," they said. But Clara brushed them off. Trouble? What kind of trouble could come from speaking your mind? One sunny afternoon, the village prepared for its annual festival. Stalls lined the cobblestone streets, selling fresh bread, handcrafted trinkets, and sweet treats. Colorful flags fluttered above, and musicians played lively tunes on flutes and drums. Laughter filled the air as families strolled together, enjoying the rare moment of celebration. Even the guardsmen joined the festivities, though they remained alert, watching over the crowd like hawks guarding their prey. Captain Alden stood near the fountain in the center of the square, talking to another guard. His cap gleamed under the sunlight, catching Clara's eye as she wandered past. Something inside her stirred, a mix of irritation and mischief. How dare he strut around like he ruled everything? Clara clenched her fists, feeling a strange urge rising within her. Her heart raced as an idea formed in her mind. It was reckless, yes, but also thrilling. What if she dared to challenge him? Just once, just for fun. Little did Clara know, this fleeting thought would change everything, for better or worse. As the festival continued around her, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mind, Clara took a deep breath and stepped closer to the fountain. This was going to be interesting. As the golden hues of sunset bathed the village square, Clara's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Captain Alden, who stood near the fountain, deep in conversation with another guard. His gleaming cap sat perfectly on his head, almost mocking her with its polished perfection. It was as if it dared her to do something, anything, to disrupt the order he so rigidly enforced. The thought made her blood boil, but it also sent a strange thrill coursing through her veins. Clara glanced around nervously, noticing the villagers watching her with a mix of curiosity and concern. Some whispered behind their hands, while others simply shook their heads, silently urging her to walk away. But Clara wasn't paying attention to them anymore. Her focus was entirely on the captain, her mind racing with possibilities. What would happen if she actually did it? Would he explode in anger? Would the crowd cheer or gasp in horror? The uncertainty only fueled her determination. Taking a slow, deliberate step forward, Clara slipped through the throng of people, careful not to draw too much attention. Her movements were quiet, almost invisible amidst the festival's lively chaos. Musicians played louder, children laughed, and vendors shouted their wares, creating the perfect cover for her bold plan. As she approached the fountain, her palms grew sweaty, and her breath came in short bursts. She told herself this was just a harmless prank, a way to show the captain that he wasn't untouchable. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. This was about proving something, not just to him, but to herself. Finally, she was close enough to see the faint lines of concentration on Captain Alden's face as he spoke to the other guard. Close enough to hear the soft rustle of his uniform as he shifted his weight. Close enough to act. With one final glance around to ensure no one was looking directly at her, Clara reached out, a quick, fluid motion, and snatched the cap right off his head. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Clara held the cap in her hand, feeling its weight and texture, marveling at how such a small object could carry so much power. Then, without thinking twice, she tossed it high into the air. The cap spun gracefully, catching the fading sunlight and glinting like a coin flipped into the sky. Gasps erupted from the crowd as everyone turned to watch, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Children stopped playing, musicians paused mid-note, and even the horses pulling carts nearby seemed to hold their breath. The cap landed with a soft thud in the dirt a few feet away, rolling slightly before coming to rest near the edge of the fountain. Clara stood there, her arms still raised, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. For a moment, she felt invincible, as though she had struck a blow against the oppressive rules that weighed down the village. But her triumph was short-lived. Captain Alden turned slowly, his expression unreadable at first. Then, as realization dawned, his face transformed into a mask of fury. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flared, and his icy blue eyes locked onto Clara with an intensity that made her stomach drop. The murmurs of the crowd faded into silence as all eyes shifted between Clara and the captain, waiting to see what would happen next. Clara's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. She hadn't expected this kind of reaction. Sure, she'd anticipated some anger, maybe even a stern reprimand. But the raw, unbridled rage in Captain Alden's eyes was something else entirely. He took a step toward her, then another, his boots crunching against the gravel with each heavy stride. Clara instinctively took a step back, her confidence wavering under the weight of his glare. Before she could say or do anything, Captain Alden grabbed her by the arm, his grip firm and unyielding. "What do you think you're doing?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The question hung in the air. heavy with accusation. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. All she could do was stare up at him, her earlier bravado crumbling under the reality of the situation. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. Clara's friends exchanged worried glances, while older villagers muttered prayers under their breath. No one had ever dared to challenge the captain like this, not in living memory. And now Clara was about to face the consequences of her impulsive act. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: life in the village would never be the same again. The day of Clara's public apology arrived sooner than she expected. The village square, once filled with laughter and music during the festival, now felt heavy with tension. Villagers gathered in clusters, their faces a mix of curiosity, disapproval, and reluctant hope. Word had spread quickly about Clara's promise to make amends, and while some were eager to see her take responsibility, others remained skeptical. Could someone so defiant truly change? Clara stood near the fountain, her hands trembling as she clutched the small piece of parchment containing her apology. Lieutenant Elias stood beside her, his presence a quiet reassurance. Captain Alden was there too, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression unreadable. The weight of his gaze made Clara's stomach churn, but she forced herself to focus. This wasn't just about him. It was about everyone in the village. When the murmurs of the crowd began to die down, Elias stepped forward, raising his hand to signal for silence. "We are here today because mistakes were made," he began, his voice steady and clear. "But we are also here because Clara has chosen to take responsibility for her actions. She will speak now, and I ask that you listen." Clara took a deep breath, stepping forward until she stood directly in front of the crowd. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. For a moment, she hesitated, overwhelmed by the sea of eyes watching her. Then she remembered Elias's words: "Passion without purpose is dangerous." She straightened her posture, lifted her chin, and began to speak. "I want to say, I'm sorry," she started, her voice shaky at first, but growing stronger with each word. "What I did was wrong. I didn't think about the consequences, not just for myself, but for all of you. I let my frustration get the better of me, and I acted recklessly. I threw the captain's cap in the air thinking it was harmless, but I realize now how disrespectful it was. It wasn't just a prank. It was an insult to the rules and order that keep us safe." She paused, glancing around at the villagers. Some looked surprised by her sincerity, while others still seemed guarded. Clara swallowed hard and continued, "I've spent the last few days reflecting on what I did, and I understand now why it mattered. The guards aren't just enforcers, they're protectors. And I owe them, and all of you, an apology for undermining that trust. If given the chance, I want to earn your respect back. I'll do whatever it takes." The square fell silent after she finished speaking. Clara lowered the parchment, her hands shaking even more now. She braced herself for judgment, for shouts of anger or accusations of insincerity. But instead, she heard something unexpected: applause. It started softly, from a group of children who had always admired her boldness, then grew louder as adults joined in. Not everyone clapped. Some remained stoic, their expressions unreadable, but the sound was enough to bring tears to Clara's eyes. Captain Alden stepped forward then, his face still stern but with a hint of softening in his eyes. "An apology is only as good as the actions that follow it," he said firmly. "You'll work alongside the guards for the next month, performing tasks under close supervision. If you prove yourself, we may consider this matter resolved." Clara nodded eagerly. "Thank you, Captain. I won't let you down." Over the following weeks, Clara threw herself into her duties. She helped clean the village streets, assisted the guards with organizing supplies, and even volunteered at the market to ensure everything ran smoothly. At first, people kept their distance, unsure if they could trust her. But as days turned into weeks, Clara's determination began to win them over. She worked tirelessly, never complaining, always offering a smile or kind word to those around her. Lieutenant Elias became her mentor during this time, teaching her not just about discipline, but also about leadership. Being brave isn't about breaking rules, he told her one evening as they walked through the square. It's about knowing when to stand firm and when to listen. You're learning that balance, Clara. Keep going. By the end of the month, Clara had earned not just the respect of the guards, but also the villagers. They no longer saw her as reckless or defiant. They saw someone who had made a mistake and worked hard to fix it. As she stood in the square on her final day of service, surrounded by smiling faces, Clara realized something important. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a better future. And for the first time, in a long while, she felt truly proud of herself. The cell was cold and damp, its stone walls leaching the warmth from Clara's body as she sat huddled in a corner. The faint light from a flickering lantern outside cast eerie shadows that danced across the floor, doing little to chase away the gloom. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each minute heavier than the last. Clara wrapped her arms tightly around herself, not just for warmth, but as if trying to hold herself together. Her mind refused to quiet, replaying every detail of what had happened. The cap spinning in the air, Captain Alden's furious glare, the horrified gasps of the crowd. She felt trapped, not just by the bars of the cell, but by the weight of her own regret. As the hours dragged on, Clara began to think about the people she'd left behind. Her parents, who had always warned her to stay out of trouble. Lila, whose face had been etched with worry as Clara was led away. And the villagers who now likely saw her as reckless or foolish, or worse, someone who deserved punishment. She wondered if anyone would visit her, or if they'd all decided she wasn't worth the risk. The thought made her chest ache. Loneliness crept in, wrapping itself around her like a second layer of chains. Her thoughts turned inward, replaying moments from her life when she'd acted impulsively without considering the consequences. There was the time she climbed the tallest tree in the forest, only to get stuck and need rescuing. Or the day she argued with the baker over prices, embarrassing her mother in front of the whole market. Each memory was a reminder of how often she let her emotions take control, leaving chaos in their wake. But this was different. This wasn't just a bruised ego or a scolding. This was real, tangible fallout that affected more than just herself. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Clara stiffened, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. The heavy door creaked open, and two figures stepped inside. Her parents. Her mother's eyes were red and swollen, while her father's jaw was clenched so tightly it looked painful. They didn't speak at first, simply standing there, their expressions a mix of anger, sadness, and concern. "Clara," her mother finally said, her voice trembling. "What were you thinking? Do you have any idea how serious this is?" "I know," Clara whispered, lowering her gaze. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I don't even know what I thought." Her father sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "You've always been headstrong, Clara. That's part of who you are. But there's a difference between standing up for something and throwing caution to the wind. You've put yourself, and all of us, in a difficult position." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to show that the guards aren't untouchable, that we shouldn't be afraid of them." Her mother knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We understand why you feel that way, but actions have consequences. You can't challenge authority like that and expect nothing to happen." People looked to the guards for stability. Without them, things could spiral out of control. Clara swallowed hard, realizing how naive she'd been. She hadn't considered the bigger picture, only her own frustration. Now, sitting in this cold, lonely cell, she understood the gravity of her mistake. It wasn't just about her pride or Captain Alden's ego. It was about trust, order, and the delicate balance that held the village together. After a few more minutes, her parents stood to leave, promising to do what they could to help her. As the door closed behind them, Clara was once again alone with her thoughts. But this time, something felt different. The swirling storm of fear and regret inside her began to settle, replaced by a quiet determination. If she ever got another chance, she vowed to use it wisely, to prove that she wasn't just reckless, but capable of growth and change. For the rest of the night, Clara sat in silence, staring at the flickering light beyond the bars. She didn't sleep. Instead, she reflected on everything that had led her here. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink, Clara had made up her mind. Whatever punishment awaited her, she would face it head-on. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to make amends, not just with the guards, but with the entire village. The weeks that followed Clara's public apology and her month of service passed quickly, each day bringing new lessons and opportunities for growth. What had once been a story of defiance and recklessness transformed into one of redemption and resilience. The villagers, who had initially viewed her with suspicion, began to see her in a different light. She wasn't just the girl who dared to challenge authority. She was someone willing to own her mistakes and work hard to make things right. Clara's relationship with the guardsmen also changed dramatically. While Captain Alden remained strict, his demeanor softened slightly whenever he interacted with her. He never admitted it outright, but there was a newfound respect in the way he spoke to her. Lieutenant Elias, on the other hand, became more than just a mentor. He became a friend. His guidance taught Clara not only about responsibility, but also about empathy and understanding. "You've come a long way," he told her one evening as they sat together near the fountain. "But remember, true bravery isn't about proving yourself. It's about doing what's right, even when no one is watching." As the days grew warmer, life in the village returned to its usual rhythm. The festival incident was still talked about occasionally, but now it served as a lesson rather than a source of tension. Parents used it as a cautionary tale for their children, reminding them to think before acting. Yet they also highlighted how Clara had turned things around, showing that it's never too late to learn from your mistakes. For Clara, the experience had been transformative. She no longer saw the guardsmen as oppressive figures, but as individuals tasked with protecting the community. More importantly, she learned to channel her boldness into something constructive. Instead of challenging rules impulsively, she began suggesting ways to improve them. For example, she proposed organizing monthly meetings where villagers could voice concerns or ideas to the guards. To her delight, Captain Alden agreed to implement the suggestion, albeit reluctantly. Her friendships deepened as well. Lila, who had been hesitant at first, grew closer to Clara than ever before, proud of how far she'd come. Even older villagers, like Mr. Hargrove, started seeking her advice on matters involving the guards. "You've got a way of seeing both sides," he told her one afternoon while they shared tea. "That's rare these days." One crisp morning, as Clara strolled through the square, she noticed a group of children playing near the fountain. They were reenacting the infamous cap-throwing incident, giggling uncontrollably as one of them pretended to be Captain Alden. Clara couldn't help but laugh softly at the sight. It was strange, almost surreal, to see her mistake turned into a playful memory. But instead of feeling embarrassed, she felt grateful. Grateful that the village had forgiven her. Grateful that she'd been given a second chance. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Clara climbed to her favorite spot, a hill overlooking the village. From there, she could see everything. The square bustling with life, the field stretching far beyond, and the forest whispering secrets in the distance. She sat down, pulling her knees to her chest, and let out a contented sigh. This place, this village, was her home. And she finally understood what it meant to truly belong, to contribute, to protect, and to care. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. As the stars began to twinkle above, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would continue striving to be better, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. In the end, Clara's story became a testament to the power of redemption. It reminded the villagers, and herself, that mistakes don't define us. It's how we rise after falling that truly matters. And as she gazed at the peaceful scene below, Clara knew one thing for certain. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with courage, humility, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of change. Captain Alden's grip on Clara's arm was like iron, unyielding and unrelenting. His face was a storm of anger, his eyes blazing with a fury that made her feel small and powerless. The festival, once alive with laughter and music, had fallen eerily silent. All eyes were on them now, the crowd frozen in place as if they were witnessing something both terrifying and surreal. Clara tried to pull her arm free, but it was no use. She could feel the heat of his anger radiating off him, and for the first time, she truly understood the weight of what she had done. "What were you thinking?" Captain Alden demanded, his voice a low growl that carried across the square. "Do you have any idea what this means?" He didn't wait for her to answer, instead tightening his hold on her arm as he turned to address the crowd. "This is exactly why rules exist, to maintain order. If we allow such blatant disrespect to go unpunished, chaos will follow." His words echoed through the square, each one landing like a hammer blow. Clara winced, not just from the pain in her arm, but from the shame creeping into her chest. She had thought it was just a harmless prank, a way to show the guardsmen they weren't untouchable. But now, surrounded by the stunned faces of her neighbors and friends, she realized how reckless she had been. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the entire village. The other guards quickly closed in, forming a tight circle around Clara and Captain Alden. Their presence added to the tension, making it clear that this was no longer a private matter. One of the guards bent down to retrieve the cap from the ground, brushing off the dust before handing it back to the captain. Alden snatched it without a word, jamming it onto his head with more force than necessary. His jaw was clenched so tightly that Clara thought it might crack. "Take her away," he ordered, his voice sharp and final. Two guards stepped forward, gripping Clara by the arms and pulling her toward the edge of the square. She stumbled slightly, her legs feeling weak beneath her. The crowd parted silently to let them pass, their expressions a mix of pity, fear, and disapproval. Clara avoided meeting anyone's gaze, her cheeks burning with humiliation. As they dragged her past the stalls and toward the guards' quarters, Clara's mind raced. What would happen to her now? Would she be locked up, banished, or worse? Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the same question. What have I done? She glanced over her shoulder, searching for a familiar face among the villagers, someone who might speak up for her. But no one did. Even Leela, her closest friend, stood motionless, her hands clasped tightly together as tears welled up in her eyes. When they reached the guards' building, a cold gray structure at the edge of the village, Clara was shoved inside and led down a narrow corridor to a small, dimly lit cell. The door clanged shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the empty space. For a moment, all she could hear was the echo of the metal bars closing, followed by an oppressive silence. Then, slowly, reality began to sink in. She sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees as tears blurred her vision. The cool stone beneath her felt harsh and unforgiving, much like the consequences of her actions. Clara replayed the scene over and over in her mind. The gleam of the cap in the air, the shocked gasps of the crowd, Captain Alden's furious glare. It had all happened so fast, yet every detail was burned into her memory. For hours, or maybe it was only minutes, time seemed to blur. Clara sat there alone, grappling with the enormity of her mistake. She had always prided herself on being brave, on standing up for what she believed in. But now, sitting in the dark, damp cell, she wondered if bravery was really worth it. Had she crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? And more importantly, would anyone forgive her? Outside, the festival continued, though the mood had shifted dramatically. Laughter was quieter, conversations more subdued. The villagers whispered among themselves, speculating about what punishment awaited Clara. Some argued that she deserved leniency, while others insisted that strict justice was necessary to prevent future incidents. Meanwhile, Captain Alden paced in his office, debating the same questions. Whatever decision he made, one thing was certain: Clara's life, and perhaps the entire village's harmony, would never be the same again.